I'm AP Tally, and this is Roleplay Culture. What are the limits of the divine? How do we measure the power that the gods will grant their most devoted servants? For the Cleric in D&D 5e, we look no further than the most minor of magic, the Cantrip. Cantrips are a good measure of the power the class has access to. And the Cleric is going to get 5 in their career. 3 to start with, not bad. Definitely better than the Bard. A 4th at level 4, and their last at level 10. I think with 5 cantrips, you'll have the ones you deem most important to you. But which are the most important? What are the essential must-have cantrips for the Cleric in D&D 5e? Now these are just some of our opinions on the matter. I would love to hear your ideas in the comments below. Let's explore some 0th level spells, shall we? Number 1, Guidance. Okay, let's get this one out of the way. Probably the most famous of all the Cleric cantrips. Is there anything more holy than placing your hand onto the shoulder of your rogue who's desperately trying to pick a lock and say, "The gods are with you"?
Oh, my fingers! It's not a door. It's a thing of evil.
And you cast Guidance on them. This cantrip is available to artificers, clerics, and druids, but it always felt like the spell belonged to the cleric the most. I mean, what's more holy than asking your god for guidance? This divination cantrip takes an action to cast, has a range of touch, and lasts for a minute with concentration. Once during that minute, the target can add 1d4 to an ability check. This bonus can be added before or after the check is made. Now, the effect might not seem particularly interesting. You're basically adding a meager bonus to skill checks. So, what makes it useful? The fact that, outside of combat, you can basically give every ability check that your entire party does, as long as you can touch them, a 1d4 bonus every time, all the time, I think is pretty significant. And it's a cantrip, so you can use it as much as you want. Even in combat, this can still have use. The spells Counterspell and Dispel Magic both require ability checks to counter and dispel their targets. Buffing your wizard or even yourself to help deal with a particularly troublesome enemy spell can definitely be worth it. And if all you're doing is buffing the same nerd arm wizard so they don't fail their athletics checks while jumping over a death-defying chasm,
No! My weak nerd arms!
well, it's probably worth your effort. Number 2, Sacred Flame. When it comes to attack cantrips, I think most people gravitate towards Toll the Dead for its higher damage output. And make no mistake, the 1-2 punch of Spiritual Weapon for the initial attack and the follow-up of Toll the Dead cantrip for its extra damage is a potent mix. It does have a weakness. Necrotic damage is a pretty commonly resisted damage type, especially amongst the undead. Which is why I think we should look towards Sacred Flame as our standard attack cantrip, for a couple of reasons. This evocation cantrip takes an action to cast and has a range of 60 feet. The target makes a dex save, or it takes 1d8 radiant damage. The damage increases incrementally at levels 5, 11, and 17, as usual. The secondary effect of this cantrip is that the target does not benefit from cover for its saving throw. Remember that if an enemy has half cover, like behind some trees, they get a +2 to their dexterity save. And if they have 3/4 cover, like poking out from behind a wall, they get +5. So cover can really amp up a creature's defense, and denying them that helps the spell get through. How important that is really depends on your table. Some DMs might not make much use of the cover rules, in which case you might be better off with a different cantrip. But there are other reasons to like Sacred Flame. As mentioned earlier, plenty of creatures have resistance or immunity to necrotic damage. Shadows, specters, wraiths, lots of undead. But that's just not the case with radiant damage. What few things that have defense against that are usually things you won't really fight anyway, like angels. And some undead, like the aforementioned Shadow, actually take double damage from radiant sources. Even zombies can have their undead fortitude, that's the ability to revive to 1 hit point after being taken down, just neutralized. Sacred Flame feels very thematic to the Cleric as well. Outside of subclasses, they're the only class that get this cantrip. It's a great, reliable, solid attack spell. Number 3, Thaumaturgy. In a previous episode, we discussed the Bard taking Prestidigitation, and how that cantrip made the Bard seem much more bardy. Thaumaturgy is Prestidigitation's very close cousin, and I think it serves a very similar purpose to the Cleric, in that it just seems to give them the kind of magic a servant of a god or a goddess should have. This transmutation cantrip takes an action to cast, lasts up to a minute, has a range of 30 feet. It only requires verbal components, so as long as you're not gagged or silenced, you can still use this. Also, like the previous cantrip, Sacred Flame, Thaumaturgy is pretty unique to the Cleric. Miracle Making is the Greek translation. Little miracles, at least. Just like Prestidigitation, there are a list of effects that you can choose from, of which you can have up to 3 going at the same time. Your voice can increase in volume by a factor of 3. You can really let them know how ticked off you are. You can cause flames to change in color, flicker, change in brightness. You get real spooky with that firelight. You can cause the ground to tremble harmlessly, make the enemy think an army is at your back. You can make a sound originate from a point within the range of your choice, like a bird call, thunder, or something else. The spell is really looking like a toolkit you need to make some place look like it's haunted. You can cause unlocked doors and windows to just fly open.
Oh, hell no, I'm out.
Wow, it really is looking like that, isn't it? And finally, you can cause the appearance of your eyes to change. I swear, this cantrip is just designed to scare the crap out of people. One of my favorite uses for this spell is to target a group of enemies around a campfire, cause the fire to brighten, and shout with a deep, booming voice, pretending to be some eldritch god and frighten them away. Or the haunted house angle could be interesting too. If you need to get into a noble's house, causing the windows and doors to fly open simultaneously, with thunder crashing, might convince those nobles that your house really is haunted, and get them to leave, at least temporarily. I mean, this is a fantasy world where there are actually undead and gods, so a haunted house just really isn't that out of the question. So let's take this little miracle-making cantrip and scare the hell out of some goblins. Number 4, Light. Let's be brief with this one. I see the Light cantrip less as a very powerful spell, and more as a grudging necessity. This evocation cantrip takes an action to cast, lasts an hour. You light up an object that is under 10 feet in dimensions. It sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius and dim light 20 feet further than that. There's some interesting applications in that there are some creatures that don't like to be in the presence of bright light, but it's pretty rare. Now, you might point out how many lineages or races have dark vision, rendering this cantrip obsolete. Or how torches or lanterns, they're cheap, basically have the same effect. Let's handle the latter of those first. Torches and lanterns aren't particularly hard to get, but they are a physical resource that must be bought and accounted for. Your character can only carry so much weight, and torches, lanterns, and fuel do not last forever. And though they are cheap, they still do cost gold, and they need a free hand to carry them. Or you can just cast the light cantrip and do away with all that faff. As for dark vision, the truth is, more than likely, at least one of the characters in the adventuring party will not have dark vision. And if one doesn't have dark vision and needs to use like a torch, then it basically might as well be as if none of them have dark vision, at least from a party dynamic standpoint. And the cleric, with its key role of support, is probably the best to shoulder this burden. Number 5, Resistance. This gem is Guidance's little brother, in that it works very similarly. This abjuration cantrip takes an action to cast, has a range of touch, and lasts a minute with concentration. The individual you've targeted gets a 1d4 bonus on their next saving throw, and they can make that decision to use the bonus before or after the roll is made. Like I said, it is very similar to guidance. Getting bonuses to saving throws is surprisingly hard to find. There just aren't that many mechanics in 5e that do that. The first level spell Bless does come to mind though, which is also a cleric spell by the way. And we have a cantrip that we can use at will. Now actually using this cantrip in combat can be a little tricky. It does require concentration, only lasts a minute, maybe a little bit of forethought as well. At higher levels, you probably would rather concentrate on something else. But when you know you're going into a vampire's lair, and you want to protect your bone-crushing barbarian from being dominated and turned against you...
Pay attention to it. I want you to know how you died, and who did it to you. Your friends.
Preemptively casting this cantrip's not a bad idea. Outside of combat, it's probably where we'll get the most use for this cantrip. Again, somewhat conditional. But when someone needs to drink some poisonous potion to get the party through some kind of trap, then buffing their saving throw is the best way to help. And again, this is just tailor-made for a holy person. There are top 5 cantrips for the Cleric in D&D 5e. If you want more cantrip videos like this, then you're going to have to subscribe, ring the bell, smash that like button, leave your favorite cantrips in the comments below, and I'll see you in the parlor.